The legend of Bloody Mary is a haunting tale that lingers in our minds. It tells of a ghostly figure that appears in mirrors, summoned by those daring enough to say her name. According to the tale, if you chant Bloody Mary 3 times in front of a mirror, she will manifest, and you may face dire consequences. Though simple, the story is chilling in its implications. What if we're not alone in the mirror? What if something is lurking there, watching and waiting for us to make a misstep? Such thoughts send shivers down our spines. This legend has its roots in the past. Bloody Mary, as we know her today, was once a flesh and blood woman, a mortal with dreams, desires, and flaws. Her true name has faded into the annals of time, and her story has been warped by whispered tales through generations. According to legend, she was a healer skilled in the use of herbs and knowledge of the human body, skills often misinterpreted as witchcraft in her time. Her fate was tragic and unjust. Accusations spread like wildfire, and fear gripped the hearts of the villagers. She was wrongfully accused of sorcery and black magic, and in an effort to rid their town of perceived evil, they put her through a trial that was nothing but a sham. Labeled guilty by those who could not comprehend her gifts, she faced the harshest of punishments. On the night of her execution, they brought her to the town square, where an ornate mirror stood, the town's pride. They forced her to gaze into it while her life was mercilessly choked from her body, cursing her name and condemning her soul to its reflection. As she took her final breath, her tears fogged the glass, and her eyes locked onto her own image, overflowing with grief and injustice. Then, something changed in the mirror. It was as if the line between reality and reflection had blurred, and at that moment, her spirit did not pass on, but became ensnared within the glass. Since that fateful night, the legend holds that she is forever bound to mirrors, a restless spirit seeking either justice or vengeance for her untimely demise. According to legend, her first appearance was to an innocent child, unaware of the old ritual's seriousness. While bored during a game of hide and seek, the child stumbled upon a dusty, ancient mirror in the attic of an old house. With the boldness that only youth can muster, the child chanted Mary's name. Not once, not twice, but 3 times, peering into the dim, cobweb-covered reflection. At first, nothing happened. The attic was steeped in heavy silence, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the eaves. Suddenly, the surface of the mirror began to ripple, as if a stone had been cast into still waters. The child's reflection stretched and warped, giving way to a visage of sorrow and rage. Bloody Mary emerged from the glass, her spectral form draped in garments from her era, her eyes ablaze with the fires of her cruel fate. Paralyzed with fear, the child could only watch as Bloody Mary reached out from the mirror, her hand passing effortlessly through the barrier between the living and the dead. Though her fingers never touched the child, a cold wind swept through the attic, extinguishing the candles and plunging the room into darkness. When the lights flickered back on, whether moments or hours later, the child could not say, Bloody Mary had vanished, leaving the mirror a mere reflection once more. With her connection to the mortal world established, Bloody Mary set about enacting her revenge. She used her bond with the child to hunt down those responsible for her suffering, one by one. The child became an unwitting pawn in her game of retribution, a vessel for her wrath. The town's elders, who had judged her so many years ago, began to meet untimely ends, each death shrouded in mystery and marked by bizarre circumstances. One notable tale involved a man found lifeless in his locked study, his face frozen in sheer terror. It was said that he was scribbling frantically in his journal when the room's temperature plummeted. candlelight flickered and danced, agitated by an unseen presence. He looked up from his desk to see Bloody Mary's figure forming in the polished surface of the mirror on his mahogany bureau. Her gaze locked onto his, ensnaring him in her supernatural hold. Her eyes, her eyes, her eyes, her eyes, her eyes. He had seen something so horrifying within the depths of the mirror that it stopped his heart. His body was twisted and contorted, suggesting a struggle, yet there were no marks upon him, no signs of a physical attack. The only disturbance lay in the journal and the man's wide-eyed stare, which seemed to bore into the mirror even in death. The authorities were baffled. The physician concluded that the man had suffered a heart attack brought on by extreme fright, but the townspeople whispered of curses and hauntings. The man's demise was not an isolated incident. In the weeks that followed, more of the accusers succumbed to similar fates, each death more chilling than the last. As the days went by, more unsettling stories surfaced. One woman reported that while she was combing her hair before bed, she caught a glimpse of a faint figure in the mirror behind her. It disappeared as she turned around, but the unsettling feeling of being watched remained, creeping across her skin like the legs of a spider. Another man claimed to have heard soft, mournful whispers of a woman's voice emanating from the antique mirror in his foyer. Pleading for release or perhaps seeking vengeance. In response to the unexplained deaths and growing panic in the town, the authorities reached out to a well-known paranormal investigator. This stoic figure, equipped with a sharp intellect and an open mind, arrived with a group of assistants and a variety of arcane instruments designed to detect and measure the unseen. He set up his base in the town square, close to the site of the healer's execution, and announced his intention to conduct a vigil on the upcoming night of the full moon, a time when, he claimed, the veil between worlds was at its thinnest. The entire town gathered to witness the event. The square filled with a sea of anxious faces, all focused on the investigator and his elaborate setup. At the stroke of midnight, he began the ritual, his voice steady and commanding as he called out to the spirit of Bloody Mary, inviting her to reveal herself and communicate with the living. For hours, nothing occurred. The investigator and his team remained watchful, their eyes never leaving the array of devices and mirrors positioned strategically around the square. Just as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, the needles on the investigator's instruments started to dance wildly. A chilling wind swept through the square, and the crowd gasped in unison as the surface of a large central mirror began to shimmer and distort. The investigator, his heart racing with a mix of fear and exhilaration, observed as the spectral figure of Bloody Mary materialized within the depths of the mirror. Her expression shifted from one of anger and sorrow to a plea for understanding. She reached out toward the investigator, and in that moment, he realized she was not a monster to be feared, but a soul in torment, longing for peace. With the assistance of a local priest and the town's elders, the paranormal investigator performed a rite of absolution, a final act of justice to release Bloody Mary's spirit from its mirror-bound prison. As the last words of the ritual were spoken, the mirror cracked from corner to corner to corner to corner to corner, and a collective sigh of relief washed over the crowd as the apparition faded from view. The townspeople believed their troubles were over. The horrific deaths that had plagued their town would cease, and the malevolent spirit that had tormented them was finally laid to rest. Until a woman of high standing, once vocal in her accusations against the healer, was discovered wandering the streets late at night, her nightgown torn and soiled. She muttered incoherently about a mirror, a woman trapped within, and the cost of deceit. Her once sharp mind had unraveled into a chaotic blend of fear and confusion, leading her to spend her remaining days screaming in horror as she described haunting visions of death and the supernatural. These terrifying images mirrored the fates of her former companions, those who had joined her in condemning the healer. It was as if Bloody Mary had implanted these visions in her mind, a cruel reminder of their collective role in the woman's demise. The noblewoman's screams became a siren song to the supernatural, a haunting melody of madness that seemed to summon the very spirit they had wronged. The town's blacksmith, a man whose hands had forged the chains that bound Bloody Mary to the stake, awoke one night to find his reflection in the anvil's polished surface, twisted into a grotesque parody of his own robust form. The image morphed further, revealing the vengeful spirit's visage. Despite his efforts to turn away, he could not look away, and as dawn broke, his reflection remained distorted, a silent testament to his part in the healer's downfall. The next day, he was found withered as if decades of life had been drained from him in a single night, his eyes forever fixed on the unyielding gaze of his own reflection. As news of the blacksmith's death spread like wildfire, it reignited the fears that had long simmered beneath the surface. Panic consumed the villagers as they came to realize that the legend of Bloody Mary was no mere tale to frighten children into obedience, but a terrifying truth they could no longer dismiss. With each passing day, the town's fear deepened, casting a shadow over every household with a mirror. Parents whispered warnings to their children as the braver souls draped their mirrors with cloaks and shawls, hoping to protect themselves from Bloody Mary's vengeful glare. Yet not all reflective surfaces could be concealed. Some were too large, too integral to the homes they adorned. The townspeople began to regard their own reflections with suspicion, haunted by the thought of those eerie eyes staring back at them. And so, the town remained in suspense, each resident dreading the moment their own reflection might betray them. Mirrors that could not be draped in black cloth were shattered into pieces, their shards scattered to the wind in a desperate bid to sever the connection between their world and the spectral realm of Bloody Mary. Panic rippled through the village as the pattern of retribution became evident. Those who had wronged the woman now called Bloody Mary lived on borrowed time, each day marked by desperate prayers for mercy that would never arrive. The once vibrant streets fell silent, the air thick with collective guilt and the pungent scent of fear. As the legend of Bloody Mary grew, so did the cautionary tales whispered to children to deter them from invoking her name. "She's always watching," the elders would say. "Even if you can't see her, she's there behind the glass, waiting for her chance to pull you into her world of sorrow and despair." Slowly, the town began to return to a semblance of normalcy, though the fear of Bloody Mary's return lingered in the back of their minds. The legend of Bloody Mary remained a chilling reminder of the past, a story passed down through generations, warning of the dangers that lie within the reflections of our own making.